Okay, folks, today I am here and incredibly grateful to be speaking to Dr. Rachel Millner today. Thank you so much, Rachel, for coming and talking to me. I want to start off. I usually try to have a super important question at the start. I want you to tell me how it's possible that you got a child to actually participate in any form of your work. Because the minute I tell my kids, they're like, I'm out. I got no interest unless it's like UFC or something. How did you get that to happen?
To get kids to come to therapy?
No, to
Oh,
get your kid to do your video because I saw that you
oh, that video.
thing. And I'm like,
Okay.
girl, how does she get her kids to participate in that? Because my kids don't want to touch anything I do.
That's so funny. Yes, he was such a good sport. They are really excited about this project that I'm working on with trying to get hired by Peloton. So
Yeah.
anything related to that, they're all for. If I had tried to get them to do something else, it wouldn't have worked. But
Ah, okay. So there's the secret. We have to get them excited about the project, which we're going to
yeah.
talk about, obviously. So you have 12-year-old twins since we're on the topic of your kids. So do your kids have a full understanding of what it is that you do and what you offer children? And moreover, do you feel that they might actually follow you in your path to some degree?
They have a really good understanding of what I do, partially because I've been talking to them about it since they were much younger. And
Okay.
so they definitely understand what I do. As of now, I don't think either one of them will follow in my footsteps, but they're young, so we'll see.
Okay. Now you're in Pennsylvania, as I understand it, and you're also a single mom. So I'm a single mom as well. One of the things we like to talk about is balance when we have a full-time career and we've got children, especially at this age. Good luck because they're headed to the teens. And boy,
I
do I
know.
remember that.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, as in the profession you're in, how do you cater to things or how do you make sure that you maintain a proper balance between both?
I don't know that there is such a thing as a proper balance. We do the best we can with what we can in the moment. Like, there are definitely times where I realize I have been too much in work mode and I need to take a step back, or I've neglected my work and I need to get back to it. So,
Sure.
I don't know that balance is ever like perfect, but I think that we can start to learn what our own signs are for when we are too far in one direction or another, and
Sure.
then start to like realign.
Now, I was thinking about this before I was speaking to you. When you look at having your own children and you have a practice where at times you are dealing with children per se, how do you learn how to cope with that? Because, like, for instance, I have a friend who deals in grief and trauma and she treats children. How do you not allow that to encompass you at home?
Yeah, I always tell parents that I work with that, their kids listen to me because they're not my kids.
Hmm.
And, my kids listen to other people because they are my kids.
Okay.
And so I think we learn to not separate it. I don't ever want to be a therapist who feels like, okay, those are my clients over there, and that somehow I'm separate from them because we all share our humanity. But I think we can bring in our own experience and relate in a way that allows us to connect with other parents or with kids. And I think in that sense, it doesn't interfere with the work because you've had your own experience, but I think it can really be an asset to the work.
Interesting. I like that perspective, as a matter of fact. Thank you for
Yeah.
doing that.
Mhm.
The other thing I want to mention is you're a poet. Now, what's interesting about that is I've published two poetry books. I can't remember the last time I did poetry, but I love the art form. So I'm curious how you being where you are right now, what made you delve into poetry? Why that direction?
I've always loved poetry, especially spoken word
Okay.
poetry. So people who like perform live poetry. It's been an interest and a passion of mine since probably high school.
Okay.
And it's just such a like raw, beautiful form of expression
Oh,
where
yeah.
you can connect and relate to people in a way that I think other forms of expression don't have that, for me, don't like land in the same way.
Sure. I get you. Would it be fair to ask you, can we see any of this work? Is it published any place? Can we read any of it?
Um, that's a good question. It is not published, but I do think I have posted some on my social media.
Okay.
So you could look and find it on social media for
There you
sure.
go. And we'll be announcing, of course, the ways to find you at the end of the interview. As a psychologist, I've always wanted to ask people like you this question because in 2025, one of the biggest issues we have right now is lack of mental health resources. So, speaking as a psychologist yourself, if I were to say to you, there is no one fix all, but the question is, where do we start as a country? Where do we start trying to get mass amounts of individuals help in this regard?
I think one is we need to improve access, which is what you're naming, but we also have to address the things that are leading to mental health issues to begin with. So if we address things like poverty, racism, and other social justice issues, I don't think people would be struggling as much as they are, and
Mhm.
the need for mental health services wouldn't be as high as it is.
You bet. And especially since we had a pandemic, we all noticed, of course, that things just got worse. Lack of
Yes.
socialization, inability to go to jobs, inability to just be our normal selves. And so now here we are. One of the things that I am fascinated with that you do that I don't get to do enough is public speaking. So my question to you is, how do you feel that you're touching lives during a public speaking session versus treating your patients? What's the difference there?
Well, when I'm with patients, it's one-on-one, and that work is really important and is such an intimate form of healing when you work with somebody one-on-one.
Yeah.
But when I'm speaking, I can speak to a much larger group of people, and it allows me to have an impact in a different way. It's more what I think about as like my activism or advocacy. And when I'm talking to people, I'm not necessarily talking about like the specifics of a mental health issue as I am about how do we change the way that we're looking at things related to mental health, or what could we be doing differently. And so I think that has an impact in a different way than the one-on-one does.
That makes sense, certainly. Now, you have your practice, you've had it for over 20 years. As I understand it, you treat both adolescents as well as adults, and your primary focus tends to be things such as eating disorders or chronic dieting. So, I have a couple questions relative to that. First off, we all know, because I've said it 100 times, I think I'm probably finally postmenopause. However, one of the joys I have noticed with menopause, which seems to be a trend, is that women in menopause and eating disorders, there's a connection there and it's on the rise. So, if you're someone like myself, who obviously I do camera work or just for my own well being, what can we do? Because menopause is something that's really out of our control. So, if we start noticing that we're having this eating disorder issue, what would you recommend we start doing or looking at doing?
So, for people who get periods and then go into menopause, the two highest risk times for developing eating disorders are the time in puberty where your period starts and going into menopause when your period ends. So, it's like headed into the reproductive years and headed out of them. And
Okay.
so I think we associate eating disorders with adolescence, but what I really want is to normalize that eating disorders in menopause are really common. So if you're headed into menopause and you notice that you're struggling, you're not alone. It's a really common time that people develop eating disorders. And reaching out to an eating disorder specialist, you're going to hear that again and again. People
Okay.
saying, you're not alone. This is a really common time to struggle.
Okay. Now, some might say, because I've heard this before, one of the biggest issues that centers around any form of an eating disorder is our health. So, meaning one side of the fence, it's about self-image and how we look at ourselves. The other side of the fence is self-preservation, our health and longevity and living longer. So, I know that you've talked a lot about it's okay to embrace the fact that, yes, I am okay just as I am. However, at what point do we have to force ourselves to realize that a disorder can interfere with our health?
I hope people always realize that a disorder can interfere with their health. Eating disorders have the second highest mortality rate of all mental illnesses. And so, anytime we are talking about eating disorders, we're talking about seriously life-threatening illnesses.
I get you. Do you know if there are, and this is unilateral, are there any signs or symptoms of eating disorders that applies to everyone, whether it's an adolescent or an adult that we should be watching for?
I think that if you find that you are obsessing about your body or about food in a way that it's interfering with your day-to-day functioning, like you notice you're trying to work, but those thoughts about food or your body are creeping in and you can't get your attention back to work, it's really interfering.
Okay.
That's a warning sign that something's going on that you could use support with.
Okay. Now, women my age have talked about this, and even some that I've talked to that are in their 40s have mentioned an increased intake or craving of sugar. So, is there a way for us to substitute maybe something like that? Because sugar isn't just about, yeah, it's good for you, meaning it's a temporary thing, it's a temporary fix. It's good to taste, everybody likes chocolate, etc. However, I never even realized how many dangers there are if you intake too much sugar. So, is there a way for us to use substitution as some form of treatment?
No, I would eat the sugar. There's not any substitution. Sugar is something we're all meant to eat. Our
Okay.
bodies know what to do with it and they know how to break down sugar. Food is supposed to be pleasurable, so it's supposed to
Yes.
taste good. And, people, when we give permission to eat, whether it's foods that tend to have more sugar or not,
Yes.
then they take up less space in our minds. It's like we don't want them as much when we've got full permission to have them. So I think eat the sugar, eat as much as you want, and trust your body to know what to do with it.
That makes sense. And thank you so much for allowing me to have that Reese's peanut butter cup later because every time I look at it, there is that stigma that's out there. I know recently when I was doing some research, I learned another one of these disorders on the rise is something called bigorexia. Are you familiar with that? Because I'm just wondering, what is that exactly?
Yeah, I am. It's more of a focus on building muscles than it is on what we think stereotypically of anorexia, of people trying to get as small as possible. That's a way of getting as muscular as possible.
Got it. Okay, gotcha. And again, I think that all stems back to all of our need to look so good and feel so good, and the pushing of the working out in the gym and being in a perfect environment where our makeup and our hair is terrific and our body always looks good and our dress is always great. Self-image is a thing. So on the plus size thing, I noticed very recently, and kudos to them, places like Nordstrom are starting to do what they call a universal size campaign, where literally everyone is available to get sizes. And there are more and more department stores doing that. However, I think we have a long way to go when it comes to acceptance of plus sizes and making it the norm. So I ask you, Rachel, do you find that we in society are accepting of those whose body might be a little larger, or do you feel through your practice as a person still not seen that way or accepted that way?
I think we have a long way to go. I don't think we are anywhere close to where we need to be when it comes to accepting bodies across the size spectrum.
Goodness. Do you feel that mainstream media or messaging, whether it's advertisements, films, etc., do you think that plays a part in how people perceive plus size men or women?
For sure. I think it reinforces a lot of the stereotypes. So it will be like the plus size person is either the villain or the funny best friend and not the star. And so it reinforces these things that we hear in the culture all the time. And then people internalize those messages.
You betcha. Now, I know this might seem a stretch to those that are listening to this interview, but it's not because I work in film quite heavily. One of the things that stood out to me was the film The Whale. You remember that individual who played it, obviously, Brendan Fraser is not overweight. He's obviously a regular, normal size actor. However, again, we go back to that. Do you feel that that was a good representation? Because I remember him being terribly depressed and alienated and isolated, etc. Does that help at all? Like, is Hollywood helping us in this regard?
So I did not watch the movie. I do
Oh,
remember it.
okay.
I didn't watch it because I heard how horrifically fat phobic it was. So I think movies like that are not helpful at all. I'm living in a plus size body. I have a very happy, full life. So this idea that people who are in larger bodies are depressed or miserable is not accurate. And the whole concept, I guess in the movie he wore one of the like fat suits, it's so offensive and harmful when they do that in movies and shows. So I protected myself from it and didn't watch it.
And I brought that up for a point, meaning that I wonder if people who use a platform such as film or television realize the impact that they have on another human being that's living the life. You're just portraying that. But someone like yourself has to put on their pants every day and live in a society where not everyone is as embracing of the beauty that comes along with being a plus size, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I
Exactly.
don't think people realize. I think that most of us don't want to hurt other people. I think generally we tend to be pretty good people at heart and that we don't want to do something that's causing harm. I think that a lot of people who are just living their life, especially if they're living it in a world where they're on film or in that career, they don't know the impact because nobody's taught them. Nobody's had
Yeah.
those conversations with them.
Oh, you betcha. And that's where it all starts, I think, is we need to start having conversations in order to accept ourselves and be okay with our own body, along with what we put into our body and coming to a level of self-identification. So, as I mentioned, you work with various different eating disorders. So let's start at the beginning here, because how does a person even know that they need a Rachel? At what point do you think a red flag needs to go off where they say, okay, I need to see someone?
I would love if when people have the first thought of, I need to change my body and I'm going to start to eat differently or move differently to do that, that would send a red flag and people would reach out then. Because if people reached out then, it could prevent so many years of suffering. Once people spiral into, the diet, which then spirals into the eating disorder, it's then they're struggling longer and it's so much harder to climb out of. So if instead of normalizing dieting, we named it as a significant risk factor for eating disorders and we intervene then, that would be the time to do some prevention work and to reach out to somebody like me.
Okay. Now, in cases where, let's say, a parent has a child, for instance, that suffers from anxiety or anorexia, for instance, because a lot of times, if you're a bulimic or anorexic, parents aren't always identifying with that or even noticing it, or it's so very well hidden. So, is there any way at all that us parents can keep eyes and ears open? Is there any way that we would know for sure that they're suffering from this?
I think the same way we want to with other topics, we want to have open conversations with our kids and create environments where they would feel comfortable telling us. I think as parents, we can do some things to try to protect our kids, like not talk negatively about our own bodies, not diet in front of our kids, make sure our kids' bodies are always respected in our homes, and then have these open conversations. I think parents have good instincts around their kids. So if you've got a kid who after every meal is getting up and running to the bathroom or all of a sudden is telling you, oh, I ate dinner at my friend's house, I'm not hungry tonight, or isn't packing lunch for school, things like that, those are warning signs that there may be an eating disorder. But I think if we can have those open and honest communication to begin with, we want hopefully kids to feel comfortable opening up and for parents to be able to ask the questions and it be part of just the kinds of conversations we have with our kids all the time.
Oh, you betcha. Open dialogue is a huge thing, of course. And then when people are first coming to you, I know that you offer in person and virtual. So are there cases where you are finding that maybe people really struggle with being in person and choose virtual? Meaning, I want to make it okay for people to understand if they're not okay with being seen, they can still be seen without being there. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, virtual has been a great option for people. I think it increases access, but it also allows people to have a choice available that may be more comfortable for them. So I think virtual can be really helpful for people who may feel too anxious to come in person.
You betcha. And I think one of the biggest battles that you have is combating and trying to figure out which one is more intense and needs treatment first and foremost. Meaning, do you treat what's going on with the body first, or do you treat their food habits first? For you as a professional, which is the priority?
It's all a priority. I don't
Figured.
separate it out because it's all interconnected.
Okay.
We work with whatever is going on emotionally, the trauma or the anxiety, the depression, oftentimes that starts to have an impact on somebody's relationship with food, but we've got to address all of it, and we can't address one without addressing the other simultaneously.
You betcha. I would surmise that individuals that come to you, maybe not so much, or maybe I'm wrong. Children, bullying, is that something that you deal with?
All the time.
I was afraid of that, unfortunately. I was hoping that was just something that's kind of gone over time. And for you personally, have you yourself sought a psychologist at one point, or can you tell us how you've come to embrace and learn to love yourself just as you are?
Yeah, I struggled with my own eating disorder when I was in college and graduate school. And so I got help. I saw a therapist and dietitian for a long time, and I still do. I don't think anybody should be working as a therapist without seeing their own therapist,
Yeah.
because it's just so important to have your own support. But how I got into the work was struggling with my own eating disorder and recognizing the ways that the culture and my family that was very focused on body size contributed to it. And
Okay.
so wanted to offer a way of healing that allowed people to recognize that size diversity exists and is meant to exist, and that food doesn't need to be restricted and restrained.
Makes sense. You betcha. Now, walk me through a bit of when a patient comes in, whether it's a child or an adult, what is your process to get them integrated into treatment? And moreover, is there such a thing as a standard treatment amount of time?
No, not in the way that I work. Different treatment modalities have different ideas about that, but I think people are all so different that the type of treatment they need, the length of time that they're going to need treatment for varies so much. So when
Okay.
somebody comes into my office, I'm starting out just trying to get to know them. I want to know who they are as a person and what they like, what their hobbies are, what's been going on for them, and then we can build a relationship and decide from there what
Okay.
their journey might look like.
I get you. And do you use particular therapies? Because I know myself, like I've done cognitive behavioral therapy and certain other treatments that have really worked well for me. Are there specified treatments for eating disorders that vary from regular psychological disorders, if you will?
There are certain treatment modalities that are specific to eating disorders, and then there's treatment modalities that work great for eating disorders and other things as well.
Okay, I've got you. So each case is obviously going to be different. You betcha.
Mhm.
Now, I'm going to assume that you accept all sorts of different insurance as well as straight flat out payments, correct?
So we don't take insurance. What we
Oh,
do is we offer sliding scales for people who need some more flexibility in terms of cost. We could
okay.
do a whole long episode just on issues with insurance when it comes to mental health, but the way
Yeah.
that we try to increase access is by being able to offer sliding scale.
That makes perfect sense. And kudos to you on doing that as well. I can't not talk about the Peloton thing
Mhm.
because, so for quite some time, many of us have been kind of hands off, nothing wanting to do with Peloton for the obvious reasons because of the danger involved with it. But now here I see Rachel's all gung ho about becoming an instructor. So talk to me a bit about, do you have reservations or did you have reservations about that? And why is it important for you to become an instructor?
So I fell in love with Peloton at the beginning of the pandemic when everything shut down and I couldn't go to the gym, but I really liked doing movement. I bought a Peloton. I didn't have any concerns about it or, any safety concerns at all. And I'd never done spinning or cycling before, so I wasn't sure if I was going to like it or not. And I definitely was surprised to fall in love with it. But one of my frustrations is that all of the cycling instructors are in smaller bodies. So they're all in thin bodies. And I love the instructors. They do a great job, but they don't look like me. And
Mhm.
I like to learn from people in all different body sizes. And I think representation is so important. And if the only people we're seeing at the front of the class are people in smaller bodies, we're sending the message that that's the body we should all be striving for.
Yeah.
And so that's how I sort of set off on this mission to get hired by Peloton.
How's it going, by the way?
It's going well. I haven't heard from them, but I'm going to stick with it. It's been something for over a year now I've been working on, and I know Peloton's a huge company, and so it's going to take time, but I'm pretty determined.
And we just got to make a lot of noise. The more people keep talking about Rachel and her projects and everything she does, they have no choice but to pay attention to you. Hence, a video series. So tell us a bit about You Ride, Changing the Face of Fitness with Dr. Rachel. What's that all about?
Yeah, so it's Revolutionize Your Ride. And what it is a series of videos. I do about three a week, and it's on various topics that intersect or combine fitness and therapy. So I'm not doing therapy, but I'm talking about, like this week, for example, I'm talking about the intersection of vulnerability and fitness.
Yeah,
And I think next week I'm talking about the intersection of like joy and laughter and fitness. So
sure.
it's combining these two different passions of mine and talking about various topics.
Understood. And as far as the video series itself, is it currently out or about to be out, or what is the status of that?
It comes out on my social media on Instagram,
Okay.
and it rolls out like Monday, Wednesday, Friday. They
Wonderful.
come
Okay.
out. Yeah.
Good deal. Okay. So if I were to ask you, is there anything else on the list besides everything else you do? Because I sound exhausted just listening to it. What else can we expect from Rachel in 2025?
My main focus right now is on this mission with Peloton. And
Okay.
so I'm doing everything I can to, get publicity, get the word out, get Peloton's attention. And really the bigger goal is to really send the message that representation matters in fitness, that we need to see all different bodies in fitness spaces. And so that's really where my heart is right now. I love my clinical work. I'm not stopping that. So I'm still
Okay.
going to be seeing clients, but my real focus for 2025 is on achieving this goal of getting hired by Peloton.
I gotcha. And now I read that I know you treat individuals in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. You're open to New York as well, I presume?
Not New York. I'm open
Oh,
to
okay.
about 40 different states
Oh,
under SciPact. And there's a link, I think, in one of my bios to the
yeah.
map that tells you which states, because
Okay.
licensure is confusing. But
I just
yeah.
wanted to clarify that so that this way, because I saw primary Pennsylvania and New Jersey, but I was just wondering about all of that good stuff. Now, as far as finding Dr. Rachel Millner, her website, www.rachelmilnertherapy.com. I also found you on Instagram and Facebook, any other places where people can find you or reach out.
The main places I am are Instagram is my main place where I post. I
Okay,
have my professional Instagram for my therapy practice, and then I have my Peloton Instagram. So
look at
that's where
that.
I post the most.
She's all over the place there, yes. So this is what I want to say to you, Rachel, because I notice that oftentimes when I interview people, when I say something like this, they never hear it, which is the reason why I say it. And I truly mean it when I say this. You are representative of a good number of people that don't get seen. You have a very important message and meaning behind what you do. And more importantly, you work very, very, very hard to make people love themselves and love one another and to get society to understand that we are all fine just as we are. So I want to take a minute just to thank you on behalf of probably thousands of people who don't tell you regularly that what you're doing really matters. So thank
Thank
you.
you. That means a
Absolutely.
lot to me.
Anytime.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for doing this. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.